Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Welcome to this special edition where we peel back the layers of power, personality, and politics that shape our world. I'm your host, Elena, and tonight we're delving into one of the most seismic figures in modern American history, Donald J. Trump, billionaire, showman, disruptor, or, depending on who you ask, the most polarizing force to ever occupy the Oval Office. With his second inauguration barely 9 months behind us, as of this October 22nd, 2025 broadcast, President Trump is back in the White House, wielding executive power like a sledgehammer. But who is Donald Trump really? How did a Queens kid from the outer boroughs claw his way to the pinnacle of real estate, reality TV, and now a second presidential term? And crucially, what drives him, and why does his return feel like America staring into a funhouse mirror of its own divisions? I've spent the last several weeks immersed in this story, poring over biographies, court documents, and declassified memos. I've spoken off the record with former aides from his first administration, anonymous insiders from his 2024 campaign, and even a few holdovers in the current White House who still believe in the man, or at least in the mission. Their voices paint a portrait of unrelenting ambition, a genius for spectacle, and a worldview that sees the world as a zero-sum arena. But as Trump marks his 210th executive order this month, more than any president since FDR in their first year, questions swirl. Is this a bold reset for America or a reckless gamble with our democracy? Stay with me as we unpack it all step by step. And remember, we've linked every source in the description below because in an era of spin, facts are our North Star. Let's start at the beginning, shall we? Donald John Trump entered the world on June 14, 1946, in the bustling blue-collar enclave of Jamaica Estates in Queens, New York. The fourth of 5 children born to Fred and Mary Trump, his was no rags to riches tale, at least not from scratch. Fred Trump was a self-made real estate developer, a tough-as-nails operator who built a fortune on middle-class housing in Brooklyn and Queens during the post-World War II boom. Fred's mantra? Buy low, sell high, and never trust a handshake. He instilled in young Donald a fierce work ethic, but also a worldview steeped in suspicion and supremacy. Insiders from the family circle, speaking anonymously of course, describe Fred as a disciplinarian who ruled with an iron fist, once sending a teenage Donald to the New York Military Academy after a scrap with a schoolmate turned into a full-blown brawl. It wasn't punishment, one cousin recalled, it was preparation. Fred saw the world as a battlefield, and he wanted Donnie armored for war. At the academy, Trump thrived on the structure, emerging as a cadet captain with a flair for command. But it was at the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania, where he graduated in 1968 with a degree in economics, that the showman began to take shape. Trump skipped Vietnam-era draft calls thanks to a series of deferments and a doctor's note citing bone spurs, a footnote that's haunted him ever since. Graduating into a city on the brink of bankruptcy, he joined the family business, rebranded it the Trump Organization, and set his sights on Manhattan's glittering skyline. By the early 1970s, he was negotiating with the federal government to settle a racial discrimination lawsuit against his father's company, accusations of steering black renters away from Trump properties. The case ended in a consent decree, no admission of guilt, but it foreshadowed the legal skirmishes that would define his empire. The empire. Let's talk brass tacks, because Trump's business saga is as much myth as ledger. In the 1980s, he transformed the faded Commodore Hotel into the gilded Trump Tower on Fifth Avenue, a 58-story monument to his ego, complete with a penthouse waterfall and gold leaf accents. It wasn't just a building, it was a brand. Trump licensed his name to casinos in Atlantic City, turning the Taj Mahal into a $1 billion behemoth that briefly made him the king of high-stakes gambling. Forbes pegged his net worth at $1.5 billion in 1987, crowning him a symbol of the go-go 80s. But hubris has a price. The early 1990s recession hit like a freight train. 3 Atlantic City casinos filed for bankruptcy, the Trump shuttle airline cratered, and personal debts ballooned to nearly $4 billion. I use the laws of this country to my advantage, Trump later boasted, restructuring loans and emerging leaner, if not unscathed. Through it all, reinvention was his superpower. Enter the 2000s. Trump University, a for-profit seminar scheme promising real estate riches, which federal prosecutors would later dismantle in a $25 million fraud settlement in 2018. No admission of wrongdoing, naturally. And then the masterstroke, The Apprentice. Premiering on NBC in 2004, the show cast Trump as the omniscient dealmaker, barking, "You're fired," to aspiring moguls in a boardroom straight out of Central Casting. It wasn't just entertainment, it was alchemy. Ratings soared to 20 million viewers a week, burnishing his image as the ultimate winner. He turned failure into folklore, one former NBC executive told me off the record. The bankruptcies glossed over, the bravado, box office gold. By 2015, when he descended that golden escalator to announce his presidential run, Trump wasn't just rich, he was iconic. A tabloid titan with a Rolodex of grudges and a Twitter feed that weaponized every slight. Which brings us to the political arena, where Trump didn't so much enter as explode onto the scene. His flirtations with politics dated back decades. A 1987 op-ed in the New York Post railing against Japanese trade cheats, a brief Reform Party tease in 2000, but it was the 2011 birther crusade, peddling baseless claims about Barack Obama's birthplace, that first weaponized his outsider shtick. Fast forward to June 2015. The American dream is dead, he thundered from Trump Tower, vowing to build a wall, drain the swamp, and make America great again. What followed was a masterclass in disruption. Bypassing super PACs and scripted speeches, Trump turned rallies into rock concerts, red hats waving, chants of "lock her up" echoing through arenas. His tweets, now infamous missives from @RealDonaldTrump, cut through the filter of traditional media like a hot knife, 140 characters of fury, fact checks be damned. The 2016 victory stunned the world, a populist tsunami that swept aside Hillary Clinton with 304 electoral votes. Insiders from the campaign war room, still bound by non-disclosure agreements but whispering to journalists like me, describe a leader who demanded absolute fealty. Loyalty or the door, one strategist confided. He'd fire you mid-sentence if you questioned a gut call. That style defined his first term, tax cuts that juiced the economy to 4.2% GDP growth by 2019, the Abraham Accords, a Middle East peace breakthrough that earned bipartisan nods, a criminal justice reform bill, the First Step Act, hailed as a rare win for compassion. But the shadows loomed large. 2 impeachments, the first over Ukraine aid and a quid pro quo, the second tied to the January 6, 2021 Capitol riot, where Trump's election fraud claims incited a mob that left 5 dead and democracy teetering. He saw the presidency as a personal grievance machine, a former chief of staff told me. Every lawsuit, every tweet, it was about settling scores. Polarization. Trump's rhetoric supercharged it. Pew Research studies from the era show partisan divides widening to chasms. 80% of Republicans viewed him as a strong leader, while Democrats saw a threat to norms. His travel ban on Muslim-majority countries sparked airport protests. Family separations at the border drew global outrage. And the Twitter storms accusing foes of treason, amplifying QAnon whispers, turned social media into a battlefield. Yet for his base, it was cathartic. He says what we're all thinking, a rally goer in Pennsylvania told me during the 2024 cycle. No more PC handcuffs. The 2020 loss to Joe Biden was a bitter pill, one Trump refused to swallow. Legal salvos, 60-plus failed lawsuits, gave way to Stop the Steal rallies, culminating in January 6th. Convicted in May 2024 on 34 felony counts in the New York hush money case, he turned indictment into ammunition, framing it as witch hunts by the deep state. The Supreme Court's July 2024 immunity ruling shielded official acts, and his 2024 triumph, beating Kamala Harris with 312 electoral votes, vindicated the narrative. Inaugurated on January 20th, 2025, Trump's second act has been a blitzkrieg of executive action, echoing the controversial Project 2025 blueprint he once disavowed, but whose architects now staff his inner circle. By October 22nd, 2025, the numbers are staggering. 210 executive orders, from EO 14147 on border fortifications to EO 14356 revoking Biden-era climate mandates. Immigration remains ground zero, a promised mass deportation apparatus, with ICE raids ramping up in sanctuary cities. In June, federal troops deployed to Los Angeles amid protests. By October, Chicago saw armored vehicles rolling in, authorized by Trump as a bulwark against what he calls an invasion. Policies align eerily with Project 2025, slashing the federal workforce by 50,000 via Schedule F reclassifications. Tariffs up to 60% on Chinese imports, sparking market jitters. Energy independence? Drill, baby, drill. EO's greenlighting Arctic drilling and axing electric vehicle subsidies, boosting big oil stocks but drawing EPA lawsuits. On social fronts, the reversals sting. The FDA's October approval of generic mifepristone flew in the face of Trump's abortion ambiguities, but his administration ended emergency abortion mandates in hospitals, citing states' rights. DEI initiatives purged from federal guidelines with terms like gender equality scrubbed from regulations, a Project 2025 hallmark that sparked campus walkouts. Foreign policy, non-interventionist at core but with teeth, a fragile Gaza ceasefire holds, brokered in February, yet troop surges in Eastern Europe counter Russian saber rattling. And the economy? Tax cuts were extended, but inflation ticks up to 2.9%, with critics blaming tariff wars. Revised second quarter GDP growth hit 3.8%, driven by consumer spending and a narrowing trade gap. Yet overall, 2025 growth lags at 1.8%, with unemployment steady at 4.3%. Now, the paradoxes. The heart of Trump's enigma. He champions free speech as a battle cry, yet his FCC pushes to fine broadcasters for fake news coverage of his administration. He decries the deep state while stacking agencies with loyalists like Russ Vought at OMB and John Ratcliffe at CIA. Studies from Brookings, updated just last week, show regulatory rollbacks accelerating. Over 150 rules delayed or repealed by October 20th. From environmental protections to labor standards. Supporters cheer the deregulation boom. Detractors warn of a hollowed-out government ripe for cronyism. Anonymous voices from the front lines add texture. A mid-level advisor in the West Wing confided, "He's electric, ideas flying like shrapnel. But cross him and it's scorched earth. Loyalty isn't optional, it's oxygen." Another, a holdover from the first term, lamented the isolation. "The echo chamber's thicker now, no devil's advocates, just yes men. January 6th lingers like a ghost." Yet, even critics concede his magnetic pull. At a recent Mar-a-Lago fundraiser, attendees gushed about the America First vibe, jobs repatriated, borders fortified. "He's not polite," one donor said, "but he's effective." So where does this leave us 9 months into Act 2? Trump's vision, a muscular, unapologetic America, resonates with 74 million voters who see him as the antidote to elitism. His economic disclosures, mandated post-inauguration, reveal a net worth north of $7 billion, tangled in Truth Social stock and golf course deals, yet no major conflicts have stuck. Thanks perhaps to that immunity shield. But the societal toll? Polarization polls at all-time highs, with 62% of Americans reporting high stress over politics, per Gallup's October survey. Trust in institutions? Shattered further by claims of 2020 rigging redux in 2024 recounts. A government shutdown drags into its 21st day, with USDA offices skeletal despite Trump's pledges to farmers. Nominees like Paul Ingrassia withdraw amid scandals, exposing GOP fractures. Is Trump a democracy's defender, swinging the pendulum back from progressive overreach? Or its disruptor, eroding norms with each tweet storm and troop deployment? His defenders argue only a bulldozer like him can till fallow ground. Critics counter that he's plowing under the guardrails that keep us steady. As one former speechwriter put it, he won because he spoke to the forgotten. But governing, that's the real test. And right now, it's pass-fail on unity. Folks, that's our deep dive into the Trump tempest. We've cited the orders, the studies, the whispers, but the verdict? That's for history to judge.